Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Going Rogue Podcast. Before we get into it, we're going to take a second and thank some of the companies and the people that make this whole thing possible. This episode is also brought to you by HeavyAthlete.com. HeavyAthlete.com is a cross-compatible database, meaning you can link all of your historical scores from NASGA to your Heavy Athlete profile, regardless of how your name was ever entered. All of your new scores will automatically update into NASGA going forward as well. We've created a pro women and a lightweight women's class, meaning you can finally see where you rank in your actual class. It's receiving updates all the time and is free to use for athletes and ADs. For more information, go listen to the One Turn NASGA No More or go to heavyathlete.com. The Lloyd Family Farm Highland Games. Signups are now live on Iron Podium. Go to the filter feature and select Highland Games. You should be able to find it. If not, just search Lloyd Family Farm Highland Games on ironpodium.com coming up in April of 2024.
Well, beautiful. Let me turn the volume up so I can hear your gorgeous voice.
Is this going to be one big episode of us just being kind of gay to each other? And then
I don't know about kind
deal
of.
with it. Not if you have anything to say about it.
Yeah, that's right. That's how I kind of get to see you. I purposely put on my computer glasses that I wear for work just to irritate you.
Nerd. Oh man, but yeah, so this episode's just going to be you and me because Matt's busy and Mike keeps dodging everything, so we've got the better half of both of our organizations here. Yeah, so
we trim the fat.
Yeah, literally. I mean, one of our partners is incredibly fat, and the other one is a literal lightweight. So it's confusing. All right, well, for everybody that'll be tuning in whenever I get this edited, this is the episode with Aaron George and just me. So, Aaron, since you are old and retired, and there may be people listening that don't know you.
I would say the majority of people who are probably listening don't know me, and that is that wouldn't matter if I was retired or not.
That's fair. If it helps you, no one actually listens to this either. So, nothing's going to change.
Okay, I'm really glad we're doing this.
Yes, this is a good use of both of our times. But I'll try to sum it up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you were an amateur thrower, then a pro thrower, and you were also the co-runner, or are the co-runner of Throwbros. I'd say those are kind of the biggest headlines, right, in terms of Highland Games.
Yeah, I mean, as far as kind of my progression through the games, and started off like everyone else did kind of tripping over the implements and getting excited, involved by a second party or an outside party, and progressed from there and spent a couple years throwing as a pro, kind of traveling primarily in the Southeast, but I got some opportunities to go to other states in the U.S. And yeah, Mike and I opened up Throwbros. I forget the exact year. I don't remember if it was 15 or 16, somewhere around there. And we have been horribly absent and neglectful in that business since both of us have retired.
Yeah, it's almost like you're not directly involved with the sport at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Weird how that works. That's all right. I'm going to keep starting the rumor that you're going to take over the Greenville games until it actually happens.
I don't think it's a rumor. I mean, it really is. It's happening. It's just me finding the time to make it happen.
Or sorry, not Greenville. Shoot, where do you live now? Asheville.
Asheville.
I'm going to start the rumor that you're taking that one over since you already have the Greenville games.
Oh, so here's my ignorance. There's no games in Asheville though, right? I think the closest one is what, Grandfather?
No, so there is an Asheville games that Chad Clark, who ran Greenhill, puts on in February.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I've been trying to get him to at least get.
That's a great guy, and I'm sure he talked about it.
But I keep telling him to tell you to at least like come out and get on the mic or something, because the more the merrier, and you're literally there now.
No, that actually probably would be fun. He and I were messaging back and forth a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, about odds and ends. He may have brought it up at that point, but also games in Asheville in February. That's
dude. So what they do is the vast majority of the festival is actually inside. I haven't been yet, but it is hosted at some sort of like event center.
Yeah.
But then the athletes are outside. So I would still be freezing my nuts off, which is unfortunate. Everyone else, all the vendors, all the pipes, everyone else is inside and warm. They're having a great time.
Do they throw all events or limited?
I want to say it's at least a 7-event game.
Yeah.
I think field size has been an issue in the past. I don't want to speak with like absolutes because I haven't made it down there yet. He invites me every year, and it's just traditionally on the same weekend as my kid's birthday, and it makes it pretty hard to get down there.
Right. You could ask your kid to adjust his birthday. That's
Yeah. Be like, hey, you're being kind of selfish here. I need to go put on a skirt and throw rocks kind of far.
It's going to show up in therapy.
He gets triggered every time he hears bagpipes. He can't watch whatever Highlander remake they're on by the time he's old enough. Oh, yeah, no, this is a great plan. I'm definitely father of the year.
Yeah.
So not that this is going to have a ton of structure to it, and we can really talk about whatever you want, but I figure most of our audience is new throwers. So let's kind of run through the usual stuff. Like, when did your amateur career in the Highland Games start? What year did you get into this shenanigans?
So again, dates more and more get kind of fuzzier and fuzzier, but it was somewhere around that. I guess it would have been 2012. Sounds like a number.
You know what I could do is, while you're talking, I could pull this up on like Cabermetrics or something, since I'm, running this podcast.
Since you're running the show.
Or I could tell you on, we'll get to this at some point. I could actually pull you up on the database that we just created that's going to hopefully replace NASGA.
Oh my.
I could pull you up on, we're like the 17th person to try that out. So let's see, you're on heavyathlete.com, shameless plug. Your earliest scores are from 2012 at the Greater Greenville Scottish Highland Games.
Oh, good. And I was dead on the year. Yeah, it's funny that it worked out that way too. It's just I had been living in Greenville about a year or two at that point. I moved down from Charlotte, North Carolina, to Greenville for work, and Mike had actually gotten involved in the Highland Games about a year or two prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Beach enjoyed a relative amount of success early on. He was a pretty decent thrower, and he got there quickly.
Yeah,
quicker than most of us do. So
must be nice.
That was not my path. But he was throwing, and then he, like anything else, I'm sure he was looking in NASGA at the time or online to find additional games, and he saw one that was in Greenville. And I want to say that year was also where they held the Masters World Championships.
Okay.
And I seem to recall Mike Babb was thrown in that game, the Barbarian, and he's an animal. But he encouraged me, I think a couple months before the game, to find a rock. I ended up purchasing a shot put to kind of learn some of the basic principles and technique. And I bought some Landrich weights, a light and heavy weight, and I forget who made my sheath bag at the time. I just ended up practicing, and I honestly, I've mentioned this in stories and a couple of podcasts previously, that my attitude going into the games, because I had been, looking back, I really hadn't been, but it was in my mind that I was an athletic person. I played football in high school, although technically I never played a game because I severed my ACL in a scrimmage. But I was at one point athletic, and then, like most of us find ourselves doing in our 20s, I lifted for aesthetics. I did t-shirt muscles, and maybe touched a squat once a month. But anyway, I came in with that mindset that, all right, well, I'm in the gym often, so I'm going to be good at this. I'm going to come in and just wreck the field and show these people
all these idiots in kilts. I'm going to be able to beat them.
These guys have no idea the athletic powerhouse that's coming their way. That was not the case. Clearly, I had a great time. I absolutely had a great time, but it was, looking back, it was a eye-opening experience. And I think a lot of athletes, as they get into the games, you kind of go one of two ways, right? You have that normal, like, influx of excitement because it's something new, it's athletic, it's, the novelty of it's pretty exciting. And after your first games, you go one of two ways. You either, and everyone just sucks. There's no way around it unless you have a major track background. But one way is you're like, this is awful. I embarrassed myself. I'm never doing this again. And your Highland Games chapter ends, or you get obsessed. You get bit by the bug. Everyone talks about it, and thankfully I went that route. I enjoyed it. I did not enjoy throwing as poorly as I did, and so that kind of mixed with a obsessive desire to keep getting better. It ended up working out pretty okay.
It's almost like everyone in our friend group has ADD, and we all tend to hyperfixate on things.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But we can get into this later too, but there was an absence and there was a void of that focused intensity when I left the Highland Games. Thankfully, it ended up being at least a couple months out of the year, it was taken up by deer hunting. But outside of that, I'm lost. I'm like, well, what do I?
Which, how's that going for you this year?
No, this is not a great year.
But yeah, I mean, to give the folks listening like a little bit of a reference, I'm looking at your scores from your first game, and I mean, you barely cracked 30 in the open stone. I don't see a mark for heavyweight, so I'm assuming if you threw it, you fouled them.
I believe that was 3 falls. So fouls.
Yeah. A 50-degree caber, like a 10-foot wob, and an 18 sheaf. So it looks like you hit openers on height events, probably.
I think so. And was there a lightweight on there? I remember I threw an okay lightweight.
You did. It's a 46-foot lightweight, which is a respectable, first year lightweight throw. There's nothing wrong with that.
I don't think I could hit that now. So happy with it.
And like a 23-foot Braemar, a 48-foot heavy hammer. So, pretty
pedestrian, but.
Yeah, and I mean, but to compare that, you talked about you got focused and wanted to do it. You ended the following year with, over a 40-foot open stone, over a 33-foot heavyweight. You started climbing pretty rapidly once you actually gave a shit.
Once, I kind of realized what was going on. But to your point, that's where the obsession definitely kicked in, and I found this to be true about the entirety of my Highland Games career. I guess is I stayed pretty obsessed up until about the last 2 years, and a lot of that was just physical demand and having a child. Kind of derails the time that you're allowed to go play with yourself in a field. But
you got to do it in the shower.
Also, it's against my parole, so
banned from all the parks.
But definitely my first couple of years, I was, like I said, I was just obsessed. At that point I had all the implements, I had a practice caber, and I had to make up for a lack of high school or college throwing experience by just repetition. So all those reps I could have been getting under coached guidance, or through the tutelage of someone that they knew what they were doing. I just kind of had to discover on my own, and reach out to other throwers and pick their brains for technique, and beg whomever I could to review videos and give me some feedback. But both the lifting and throwing, I was just doing it. I was doing it a lot, and that was another disadvantage that I was coming into in the games, is that again, I lifted for fun. I lifted for biceps and pecs, but I was never strong, even just gym strong. I never have been a particularly strong person, regardless of amount of dedication or time spent, or programming that I received. And that's not a knock on the coaches, because I always would see progression. I was always getting stronger in certain ways, but that level of strength never met the level of strength of honestly most amateurs on the Highland Games field.
Yeah, I mean, tell me about it. I do okay, but comparatively, you've got some absolute freaks that are in this sport, and what is impressive from a commercial gym standard really ceases to be worth a shit if you were to compare it on paper to what a lot of these guys are doing.
Oh, 100%. It ruined me, and it ruined that for me, honestly, because lifting, you go into the gym, you're lifting whatever you're lifting, you feel good about the people that are in and around. And obviously it's dependent on the type of facility you were at, but in my youth, it tended to be more like a YMCA or something
Hmm.
where the pool of candidates in there, they're doing great, they're exercising, they're getting stronger, they're bettering their lives. But when you put some of these absolute beasts that compete in the sport in the same room, it's just a night and day. It's not. It doesn't even seem like it's the same. The same species. It's
Yeah,
just
I mean
different.
it's not, man. If you look at your average guy who just goes to a 9 to 5 and then comes home to his family, if that dude can bench over 200 pounds, he's killing it. He's
Absolutely.
doing great for what he's doing. That's amazing. But if you want to be a professional in this sport, like, woof, you're gonna get rocked if that's all you got. Like,
That's gonna hurt. I think Mike had thrown out. I don't remember the specific statistic, but it's like if you can bench 225 pounds, you're in some like single percentage of
oh yeah,
people in the world that can do it. And like if 225 is your high water mark in the games, that's no bueno.
no, it really is. You're no longer comparing yourself to the median population, and it's
Right.
hard to step out of that because if you get into this sport and get obsessed with it, the only people you talk to are people in this sport.
Yeah.
So you get skewed. If I walk into the Food Lion down the street, I'm the strongest motherfucker in there. But
If you go to the Piggly Wiggly, though, those are
those
the
boys are
country
different.
boys.
Yeah, I'm not talking about Walmart now. We're not. I'm not trying to get into fights at Waffle House, but oh, so yeah, no, I'm right there with you 100%. I cannot claim nearly enough to. I'm not the strongest guy on this podcast, much less in the fucking.
I would say in this room, on this particular episode, you without a doubt are
Well,
now.
you're retired and old.
In my peak, I guarantee you were still stronger than I was. But that goes back to what I was saying is that I understood that was a limitation of mine. Again, whether it's genetics, whether it's I'm just no good at lifting, which is probably true as
there's,
well.
there's a good chance.
But the at least the determination to get under the bar, it was there and it was happening, programmed more often than not. But I understood that to be a limitation, which is why early on I was so rep and throw heavy. And
Yeah,
and again, I didn't start until I think I was already 30 when I started. So I knew that I wasn't going to make up the gap through pure strength. I had to do it through technique. So I just spent so much time doing drills, doing and honestly, like everyone does, I spent too much time on full throws at full speed.
yeah. I still catch myself doing that all the time, all
Yeah.
the time. God, I've been fighting my lightweight all season, and I need to actually step back and break it down, and I know that, but God, I don't want to. It's so boring.
It's such a disconnection of mindsets. But I really think that's common for a lot of throwers, new experience, or, veterans, whatever, that it's whether it's a confidence thing or you just want to know that, yeah, I can get out there and I can throw this number. We tend to incorporate too many full throws at full speed into our practices. And there certainly there's room and there's a need in your practices to do those, to touch that at some point, right? But again, it's no different than trying to go into the gym every day and hit a PR squat. Like you're going to
Yeah,
crush yourself.
yeah, you can't do it every day. You're gonna be broken. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's impossible. There's no way to do it, and oh, but man, is it annoying. Um, but all right, so you started in 2012, really took to it in 2013. What year did you go pro? Do you remember?
I want to say it was my fifth or sixth year throwing. And as far as the progression is that too, when I got in again after the first games, I wasn't thinking to myself, "Oh my God, I'm going to get out here and I'm going to train so hard that I'm going pro."
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the goal, and honestly, it never even crossed my mind. What crossed my mind was I want to be. So I came in as a B, like most people do. We didn't have a C class there, and I said I want to be competitive in the B class. That was my goal. and again, spent however many games and seasons focusing on that. Hit, I forget what the numbers are, but hit the numbers to, qualify to get into the A class. And I kept adjusting my goal that way. Again, at no point early on was it the goal to be a pro. And so when I got to the A class, again, I got back to getting my ass beat, and looked at some of the top A's, and I was like, I want to be competitive with them. And that was the goal, and kind of stair stepped my process throughout it. And eventually, I think when I started winning quite a bit in the A class, I went to, it was the North American AmChams. That's the one out in Enumclaw.
Yeah.
I think that was 2017, maybe.
Okay.
Spencer won the pro division that year, and then I won the amateur division that year. So, that was something that was really cool, and it was probably the first time that I had any reflection of like, all right, wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And even on a different scale, you're just as trying to be a thoughtful adult. We tend to always want to just continue to chase, and then we compare. All right, where am I versus this person? But after I won the AmChams, that's when I was actually able to enjoy it. I didn't worry about what my numbers were. I didn't worry about X, Y, Z. I just looked at the conclusion and said, well, I won, regardless of any circumstance or situation, or who was or wasn't throwing, or how I threw or didn't throw. I got to win. So I really enjoyed that. And that helped me when I eventually decided to make the jump to the pro class, and realized that I had an opportunity, and that I had the networking capability, and I built a lot of relationships to make that jump. I started paying more attention, not to the mere numbers that I threw that game, but how I felt or how I performed.
Yeah.
It's kind of tough to articulate because we do it is such a numbers game, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's all I'm able to sit here and look at on the screen looking back is numbers, That's
yeah. And I very much was, numbers obsessed. And after each game, I would go back to NASGA, hound the ADs to get the scores in,
yeah.
and then see how that would affect my standing in NASGA. And again, I think that's perfectly fine as well. But when I was able to stop worrying about that, stop worrying about distances, and see how it compares to the other people throwing on the field that day, I really started to enjoy different parts of the sport more.
Yeah.
Because that's also, advice. If you mentioned you have a younger or a newer throwing audience, is that remember when you get on NASDAQ, unless you're really getting into the weeds and going down per game, we tend to compare ourselves versus everyone else's best, right? So you see their furthest throw or highest throw over the course of that season, all on one line item. That's all you see. But you don't see their other games where, maybe they're 80-foot lightweight, maybe they hit 65, a couple games, or maybe they hit this. And, that's unique to the games because there's situational, environmental factors that play into how you can or can't throw. Some implements are underweight, some implements are overweight, some are just shitty.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're throwing uphill or downhill. So
yeah, and sometimes it just leaves you, man. You can't keep 9 events peaked year round. It just doesn't happen, It's impossible. Your brain doesn't work that way.
And there's obviously a lot of carryover from event to event when it comes to like the physical mechanics of it, or which body parts or muscles that you're firing, but it's still different. It's still varied enough that simply just practicing one event does not just carry over to the next one.
Yeah, 100%. You can't, even with the weights, you can't practice lightweight a bunch and expect your heavyweight to improve significantly.
Exactly.
None of that works that way. But yeah, I actually, while you were saying that, I pulled up, I keep an entire spreadsheet of my own throws and what their point values are and what they should be versus what they are and what is best and what is worst. And yeah, all I've got are numbers, I can't sit here and track the awesome feeling that it gives me, but I know it's there.
I mean, you can color coordinate and be like, this throw, that one's a green. This one's a green.
Well, they are color coded, but they're color coded for what is proportionately worse. because I've compared my numbers to everyone else in my division's numbers. So yeah, but I'll develop an RPE scale of just feeling. I really had fun today. Code that one.
So happy.
Yeah, rate that at 8. So anyway, you talked about your previous sports stuff already. We've talked about. How about this? Was there any particular event or set of events that just really gave you a crap load of trouble? Like for me, it's my lightweight. I still detest that event. I've become better friends with heavyweight, and really I'm fine across the board, except for that fucking 28, man. I've got the wingspan of a fucking biplane, and I can't throw a lightweight worth of shit to save my life.
That should be your event.
You would think, right? My ape score is in the positives. I don't know why that doesn't like me, but it just doesn't. Yeah. So did you have a bane of your existence event? Was there any one thing that you just constantly struggled with, and was there any way to fix it if you ever found it? Like
so Sheaf was just not my event.
Yeah. I had a guy at Myrtle Beach one year tell me the trick is to throw it over the bar.
Yeah. That's very helpful.
Yeah, he was great. He's retired now, but
I love how the Highland Games are filled with those different anecdotes. They're always extremely helpful. But
yeah, I mean, it went over the bar on the next throw. He wasn't wrong, but
there's something to it then.
Yeah.
No, Sheaf was difficult primarily because I wasn't naturally good at it. It was a strange movement for me. Obviously, we're incorporating an additional piece of equipment, which is different than technically two pieces, right? You have the sheaf and the sheaf fork. So that's outside of anything else that you're really practicing in the games. I think I was stunted a little bit because I rarely practiced on sheaf standards. So like anyone else, I would be in, just standing outside and practicing driving down and popping up and getting all of it done and feeling like, all right, it's going high, but you don't get that immediate feedback. Like, all right, it went high, but did it clear? Did it go over? And then, come game time, when you take some practice pulls and you're like, oh, that's great, it's going high. Well, now all of a sudden your brain is thinking about, all right, well, it needs to go high, but it also needs to go over that damn bar. And that there's little in throw adjustments that, all right, well, now it's shooting off left. And there's just so much going on with the sheaf. I always had problems with that, so much so that, the AmChams in 2017, that was actually the event that we opened up on. Yeah. And I think I was the second or third thrower for it. And I missed my first 2 attempts on the opening height.
Jeez. Yeah.
And, so again, my expectation going into that wasn't necessarily that I was going to win, but I also knew what it meant if I ate that many points early on. So, luckily I was able to, I cleared on the third, and I actually think I ended up winning Sheaf that day. But yeah, I've always struggled with that. Caber, it's like anyone else. I struggled with early because there's a couple parts of the throw. It's obviously the pick is one part of the throw. Accelerating the caber is another, and then the pull is the final. And you get more practice on one than the other, right? Particularly if you're just doing it in a competition, you get more practice on the pick side, so you get better with that, and then eventually you progress to accelerating it, and then finally the pull. So caber, I ended up being okay at towards the tail end of my career. Again, the lack of strength wasn't great, but where I lacked in that, I chose to accelerate the stick as fast as I could. So I was a sprinter. I would need, ADs and judges would constantly make the joke, but they'd be like, back up, everyone, here comes George. And it was true, because what a lot of professional throwers could do in, 5 to 10 steps, I needed a full 30, 40 to sprint and really just get some velocity going. So, and obviously that creates the issue of timing on the pull. But that was my solution to being a weak ass.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. There are a couple of cabers that I've run into recently that are just they're beastly. I mean, they're a pain in the ass. They don't have tapers. There's no weight difference, and if you aren't running, it won't turn. At least not for me.
Right.
I'm not strong enough to just dip down and rip it over. I can't pull that off, which is, I mean, kind of the point. But and some people just seem to have an intelligence with it. I don't know. They just any caber they pick up, they've figured out the timing. It feels like before they've ever pulled on it.
Oh, 100%. I think it was my first year as a pro, and I was fortunate enough to get an invite out to Portland. And Portland has a really awesome challenge caber. This thing it is just an absolute monster. So um, I get out to these games, and so I'll give you the roster of people that I'm throwing with. Spencer is
Yeah.
there.
You got Spencer, you got Chuck Casson, Andy Vincent. Good Lord. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a pretty big roster for, again, what I want to say it was, I almost positive it was my first year. But so all of a sudden, here I am with your previous and current titans of the sport. And Matt Vincent, Andy's brother, he was on the microphone that day emceeing. And so I had a great day, and my goal was don't finish last, and I didn't finish last.
There you go.
And I had a really good time, and got some kudos from some of the veteran throwers, like giving me the nod, like, all right, yeah, you should be here. This is good. You're not going to beat me, but you should be here.
Yeah.
I like this.
Works out well for everyone.
Yeah, he's filling up a roster spot on someone who may. But so anyway, that games I had ripped my right hand thumbnail off on lightweight. I went all out on one, and it just ripped it right out of the nail bed.
Which is a recurring thing for you. What the hell, man?
I don't know. I'm sure there's a supplement I should have been taking, or maybe I shouldn't just throw like a Labrador Retriever, just throw, retrieve, throw, retrieve.
Yeah.
But it flew off there. It came out with the tape, and so that made wob a little difficult, but I kind of suffered through. But anyway, I was feeling worn out. Right, I was just cooked trying to get those implements out as far as I could in front of this cast of characters, and my lower back was screaming too. And we just concluded caber, and then it was time to go to the challenge caber. And I was kind of talking with Matt, and I said, Bud, I am cooked. My back hurts. I said, there's no way I'm going to turn this thing. I think I'm going to pass on this one and just go clap, and I can support the other guys and cheer for them, and help pick it if I need to, or help set the caber up. And Matt kind of paused for just a second as we're walking there to the challenge caber field, and he was like, Bud, I'm going to be honest with you. He's like, it's not about you out there. It's not about whether you turn it or you don't turn it. He said, your job right now is when Spencer gets out there and when Andy get out there and they more than likely turn that caber, that big ass caber. He said, your job is to show that crowd just how fucking difficult it is. And that, at that point, that got me just like re-fired up. I was like, oh, well, fuck the rest of my life. Fuck my lower back.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm going to go out and, tug on this thing as hard as I can. I did get 3 clean picks. I did get 3 turn attempts, so I didn't have to bail on it, which I was happy about. But that was really, I thought that was really great perspective from Matt, who's obviously one of the best who have ever done it.
Yeah.
To understand that it's not just simply about the individual thrower. There is showmanship involved in the Highland games. And if that day you're not the one who's going to be on top, well, you know what? You can give some comparison for the crowd who's not as, intimately knowledgeable about the sport. You can give some comparison on like, look, this is also somewhat of a big guy. This is a heavy caber. He's having a tough time. So when those that are at the top of their game that day do get a turn, it's that much better because there's that contrast.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I think there was a conversation you and I had one day where you referred to yourself as a jobber of the pro class. And
100%.
Look, you got to have them, It's not demeaning anyone for making the pro class and then being that way, but it's how it's going to be. I don't have a 700-pound deadlift. I'm probably not ever going to throw a 19-foot wob, It's just not in the cards.
And it was, and yeah, that absolutely was the role that I took. And, part of that, came to a point where I did reach a ceiling where I had to be honest with myself, right? We all have the fantasies or the daydreams about winning this or doing that or hitting a PR throw on our third and final to, place or do whatever. But, there came a realization where, listen, now I'm competing with people who a lot of them were younger than me at that point, because by the
Yeah.
time I was a pro, I was, 35 or 36. So not only are they younger than me, they're also more experienced because they've either been in the sport longer or have a
Yeah,
little
20 years of track and field background behind them.
exactly, of throwing hammers, of throwing shot put and discus and all these things. So that, again, going back to what I said, I was happy with what I had accomplished and where I was, and that really allowed me to enjoy the pro class. Now, again, it didn't mean that my competitive nature was just smothered, because it certainly wasn't. I was competitive. I wanted, damn sure didn't want to place last, and I don't think I ever placed last in a
Yeah.
pro
And there's
competition.
always other people that you want to compete with. It may not be Spencer because I have eyes.
I have a pulse and eyes.
Yeah, I'm aware that that's a different kind of human. It shit is what it is.
Although, actually, I will say this: I did beat Spencer in one event. Now, this was not as a pro. This was as an amateur. He was pro, and we did a pro-am games in Texas. It was like Texas Strength and something.
Mm-hmm.
So they had like a powerlifting meet, and they had the Highland Games, and they matched up pros with amateurs. And Spencer, technically, he was on my team. And I know we've told this story before, but Spencer showed up so goddamn hungover. And I think it was lightweight, because he was, again, with Spencer, he's throwing at such a high level, particularly at that time with the lightweight, that it's just, he is teetering on, it's either going to be a world record or it's absolute chaos.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Someone might die, or we might watch a 98-foot throw. We're not sure which is going to happen.
But he ended up fouling out because that was happening. He was just so, again, he was just so hungover and tired, but still just mashing on the gas. He fouled all three, and I threw a measurable mark, so technically I beat him. So there's that, Spencer.
Hey, just take that. I've done the exact same thing with Matt when he was still throwing AMs. Is he had the habit of fouling out at least one event every game, with his weights early on. He'd do the same thing. He's blowing out the left side, and every once in a while I could feel like, you didn't beat me at heavyweight. You may have still won every single other event today, but guess what, fucker? Yeah. Hey, let's talk briefly. Do they have a 96-pound fucking open stone at Portland? What, or Braemar stone? What is?
No, so they have, I believe they call it the Portland stone. So they actually have I think it's like a 18-pound open stone, give or take.
Yeah, it's ranked in as 17 and a half in NASGA. I'm looking at it right now.
Right. And so, that's another little crazy thing that you run into as well, that generally, depending on regions or games, when you're looking at the AM class, a lot of athletic directors try and keep the implements, particularly like the stones, close to where you want it to be, right? So a 16-pound open and a 22-pound Bramer stone. But when it gets to the pro games, no one gives a shit. No one says anything. All right, today we're throwing a 22-pound open stone, or again a 17, almost 18-pound open stone, and you just roll with it. And it's really tough to complain when you're having trouble with it, and the guy next to you is throwing at 50 something feet. It's kind of like,
because
shut up. Here's the world you're playing and deal with it. But the Portland stone, yeah, it's enormous. Once you get the thing,
it was. I saw your score, and I was like, why does he only have a 13-foot Braemar? Why didn't he just scratch that? Who let someone mark that? And then I opened up the whole game, and I was like, well, Spencer only had a 17. What is going on?
Yeah, it's enormous, and it's fun. It's one of the little quirks of that game. Again, that, and then the challenge caber. But you find those little things, particularly if you travel outside of your region or get an opportunity to just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
You find a lot of fun little challenge events. Now, so stones and cabers, I'm fine with. Some of these games, like the Arnold, I compete in the Arnold, where you have a really heavy sheath bag. I'm not about. I am not. I was never about that life. One, I was already bad enough at sheaf,
Yeah.
but with lower back injuries the entirety of my career, that was always the most dangerous, right? Because you're pulling all the weight to one side, you're driving down, exploding up with the weight on the opposite side. I absolutely hated an overweighted sheaf.
Which is weird because you're a pretty good hammer thrower. You would think transitioning things right to left would make some
For
more sense.
whatever reason, I never had any issue with my lower back and hammer.
Huh.
Yeah, and hammer always felt comfortable. You know, I short armed it for a long time and then got loose and um, but yeah, I never felt the same issue with my lower back on hammer. Wob, it would show if I had like a an active lower back aggravation or injury, it definitely would show up in wob a bit. But
Yeah.
sheep was just that was the one that I and would limit output because you're aware of it. You know that all right, I got this little thing going on here, and it would limit how hard I was willing to crank on a sheaf.
Yeah, I've always found that you do have to crank a little more. Like Wob, I can almost ride it through if I'm well braced into a belt. I
Yeah.
can ride that backswing and still get by, and that doesn't really exist in sheaf. It's got to be dynamic
Yep.
the whole time. I mean, that's neither of us are exceptional at Wob, and maybe that's our problem. But you know, it is what it is. Let's see. Masters comeback. That was a thing that you did for a minute, right?
It was the thing I entertained for a minute.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
you
I
competed at the World Championship in what, 21, right?
at 21 in Austin, yeah, I did Masters Worlds, and that was the last time I laced up the boots to throw.
They took
And
second. Not a bad time.
I did.
Yeah.
Now, you know, here's where I'll kind of talk out of both sides of my mouth. That was one that I really wanted to win.
Uh-huh.
That was one where I had circled. I had had the conversations with my wife about listen. I think this is the last go at it. I really everybody wants the John Elway exit, right? You go out on top and there it is. And that was, that was my hope. Again, you never can control it fully. You can control your training, you control, how healthy you are leading up to it and being prepared for it. But there's clearly other throwers and variables out there. And
Yeah.
Zach, I can't remember his last name at this point.
Whittington. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the first time that I'd thrown with or against him. And I tell you what, he was awesome.
Dude,
He and
it
I
was like a
would
nail biter of a game. Just sitting here reading through the scores. Like, y'all were trading back and forth all day. Like, you'd get him in Braemar and open, and then he'd sneak ahead of you in lightweight and a hammer, and then it was just back and like it looks like it'd be really fun.
it really was, and it's a two split day event. So we did certain events day one and certain events day two. So going into day two, I was leading, and I think what surprised me because I was a reasonable hammer thrower, and my expectation was that all right, I have a small lead and we're going into hammers. This is where I could put some distance between me and the rest of the competition. Was not the case. Zach,
Yeah.
phenomenal hammer thrower. It is, and after so he threw heavy hammer first, and I realized I was like, this is gonna be tough to come back from. But so much so I got so fired up because we'd had such a good, kind of rapport day one that when he was taking extras on heavy, I was like, listen, bud, that you were laying them out there. Do you want me to watch your throws and give you some immediate feedback on anything? He was like, hell yeah. So it kind of shows that interesting thing that happens on the field. It's like, fuck, this guy is literally ripping the Masters World Championship out of my hands here, but it's so cool to watch how well he's doing and throwing
Yeah.
and just getting fired up for him. So he had some killer hammers and again, you end the day on wob. I'm like, well, fuck, I needed a cushion before we got to this event. But going back to what you're saying about a Masters comeback. So this year, or excuse me, the last time I threw in 2021, I'm pretty sure I spent a year and a half, 2 years just not even stepping foot on a field,
Yeah.
not going to a games, not really interacting with throwers outside of basically you and Mike, but generally we're talking about how we're awful deer hunters.
Yeah.
But when I went to Greenville games this year back in May, and it's tough, right? That was 10 years of my life of being competitive and spending thousands of hours
And dollars.
practicing and obsessed with things and interacting with people and got the bug for about 2 or 3 weeks and contacted Tom, my coach, and I was like, I think I want to make one last little run here, and then life happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I was like, well, that's dumb.
Yeah. Because for anyone that doesn't know, your second job is apparently moving.
Yes, that was a 3 to 4 month process that is not conducive to training at a high level.
No, and neither is what. So for those of you listening that also don't know, you had a weird thing that we initially thought was like a heart issue, right? And that was a misdiagnosis, and turns out it wasn't that. You had, we don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but it was
No,
another whole wrinkle in that same time period, right?
so it's funny. It did. It showed up a little bit prior to the Masters World Championships, and I'm trying to remember the exact year. It was after I went pro, but yeah, it was a weird feeling in my chest, and it felt completely different than any sort of like organic or muscular or tissue strain that I've ever had, and it couldn't be alleviated with ibuprofen or heat or anything, and it was pretty wild. I actually ended up going to my primary, and they hooked me up to an EKG, and it read out acute infarct, which is basically speak for heart attack.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? So we ended up, my wife picked me up and we went to the ER and they ran, some triage and did some stuff, and they couldn't get a similar reading on their EKG, and none of the blood tests showed that there were, I think it's some of the proteins that are released during that time. So anyway, it led me to, a litany of tests and everything else, and seeing a cardiologist who diagnosed it with acute idiopathic pericarditis, which is just essentially inflammation of the sac around your heart. But that, and frankly, that kind of changed some of my trajectory, because, when you go from, holy shit, did I just have a heart attack in my 30s to, well, no, you didn't, but we really don't know what it is, that tends to turn the dial down on you wanting to throw rocks.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, if it ends up flaring up on you on random practices, it's an uncomfortable feeling, I would imagine,
Yeah, it is. Psychologically, it was just bizarre. Prednisone essentially was the only thing that would alleviate it, but it would still, it would linger for a couple of weeks. So, that with again, lower back has always been an issue. That came from, like anything else, deadlifts. It probably came from deadlifting in my 20s with just the cat back, and then it showed up as a major injury in my 30s, trying to pull a PR and completely failing, and then I was more embarrassed than I was hurt, so I had to hobble around the gym taking all these plates off the bar, which is just the double defeat. But so I had to do the calculus of this buildup of injuries that I'd accrued over the course of a decade, and take a look at some of the now masters throwers, or even some of the pro throwers that are still on there, that you see them throwing and you see that they still have the skill, they're technical, they're still very strong, and they can still get numbers, but then you see them walk to their car.
Oh yeah.
And it's like it's a completely different human being. They're uncomfortable, their sleep is disrupted, they have more weight on them than they want. And I made the conscious decision that, listen, if to be competitive in the pro class and continually do it, you have to keep training at a high level. But not only that, you also have to be at a higher body weight, right? I think my last year I was throwing at 230, and that might as well be a lightweight class in the pro class, when you're looking at guys who are 280, 290, 300 and plus. And I had to make that decision that I can't risk, particularly with the unknown chest condition, I can't risk my well-being or being effective as a father, being active, to go continue to try and throw rocks.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Hey, you got to have some priorities. And that I was laughing with someone the other day about the waddle that everyone gets if they're in strength sports long enough. We all walk like we're broken and somehow think we're healthier than everyone else. it, it doesn't add up.
No, I mean it is. It's a damaging sport, and again, trying to provide advice to a an audience that may be new to the sport, understand that there certainly is time where you should be wrecked from a throwing session and from a weightlifting session. Absolutely, that's part of it. And a lot of us do enjoy that physical and tangible feedback that like I just worked my ass off. Just
Yeah.
understand it doesn't matter who you are. The repetitions and time and age, they do catch up with you. And at some point, everyone has to make that decision. Like, all right, I can either start training a lot smarter, and what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm going to have a slight decline in performance? Okay, well, what are my priorities? What do I want to do? If you're a little bit younger, or you don't have as many additional life responsibilities, then mash on the gas a little bit. Be safe, be smart, have people who know better than you coaching you, but mash on it. But at some point, you do have to make the decision like, how do I want to exist long term? And thankfully, I have walked away from the sport without any major injuries. It's like anything else. I have things that hurt. My left SI joint hurts because, contrary to what you see in video, apparently I was blocking on my moves, and that constant force of the left hip coming to an abrupt stop really, it pisses off my SI joint. But I can still walk, I can hike, I can hunt, I can fish, I can play with my little girl, I can, move for 4 months straight.
Yeah. You can do the
So
stuff that's going to matter for the next 40 years, you know?
exactly right. But that's a personal decision that everyone eventually has to make.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to carry around a receipt for whatever you've done, you know?
That's a great way to put it.
It's, it's going to be whatever it is. So I have two more things on here. One is what the heck with Throwbros, and we can talk about it or not, but like, man, Throwbros is so cool. Do more with it. I don't know.
It's so cool. Do more.
Yeah, that's all the talking point I have written down. But
Well, I'm going to go back to the board of directors and say, listen, it's so cool. Let's do more.
yeah, Jeremy says it's cool. But I really, for someone that was there to watch it, like really come up, it was awesome to watch a couple of guys, build a brand around this sport that not a lot of people love, but the people who do love it a lot, So it was cool to watch, and I miss a little bit of it because I enjoyed all the production value that went into like the HG live videos and having a little thing that was just ours,
Yeah.
It was super cool. So how do we harass you and Mike enough to to make that happen again,
Well, I think at this stage in our lives, I don't know that there's a certain amount of harassment that can get it back to, the initial quote unquote heyday of Throwbros. But, when we started that, it was a lot of that is kind of Mike's design, where not that he monetizes everything, and not necessarily that was the objective of opening Throwbros, but Mike very much has an entrepreneurial mindset
Yeah.
and drive that he saw kind of a missing service for the sport, and it simply just boiled down to initially it was just tacky, right? It used to be if you wanted to get anything other than 3 and tacky, you either had to make it yourself or you had to meet some stranger in a parking lot in the games buying shit out of their van.
Right.
It was odd transactions, and so I burned up a microwave and a couple of pots coming up um, with our tacky recipe, and it just kind of went from there. And obviously, Mike and I's passion for the sport and the connection activity with it just kind of carried through to the business. And like anything else, as our passion and opportunity and participation in the sport declined, so did our interest in the business. So, Throwbros, the funny thing is Throwbros still sells tacky. Right now it just exists as an easy place to get good tacky. It's going to ship. It's going to be
Good enough. It's still one of the tackies that I use very regularly. I got a couple of tubes of it in my box.
Yeah, and and Mike and I at least once a quarter have the conversation like, all right, well, what should we do with Throwbros? We have actually spoken about it within the past couple months about the next phase of it. There's certain things that we want to do with kind of the tacky component, but there is a conversation between Mike and I that there's a chance that we do want to hand it off back to the sport, right? Because I think we can also exist within the sport. And the brand is, for a while, it was Mike and I were the ambassadors and the face of it, but it's kind of grown outside of that. So it's our thought that Throwbros can still exist within the sport and somebody else can operate and run it. And, it's kind of like Saved by the Bell summer edition or summer series or something like that, but where someone else can take over the reins. They can not necessarily rebrand, but brand it to something that's more speaks to throwers now. Because again, 10 years that's a long time. There's a lot of careers that have started, ended in that time. So we're kind of playing around with our thoughts on who those people would be, who could manage the brand well, and who currently has the same passion that we had when we first started Throwbros. They could kind of carry that on, but continue to provide a service to the Highland Games community.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's a great way to look at it. I'm here for it. My last note, and again, this is we can talk about it or not, is TRT and PEDs in the Highland Games. Do you want to talk about it?
Take as many as you can. Orally, inject, topical. I'm sure there's some new stuff. I don't aerosol. Just take it. No, so as far as like I'll speak on it from I guess a couple angles here though. I personally have never witnessed someone take a steroid, inject a steroid, do whatever, or a performance enhancer. So, I can't definitively say that PEDs are rampant in the Highland Games community.
Oh yeah, and I would never want to bring this up as I'm not trying to I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to call people out or do anything crazy like that. I just like talking about it.
Right. So my second point to that is that you take a look at certain people on the field that I don't really know the best way to explain it other than you get the impression that they are on some sort of steroid, right?
I can't rule anything else in, and I can't rule that out. So it leads me to believe something may be going on, you know?
Right, absolutely. And again, whether that's, again, I don't know, I don't have specific intel, nor did I ever care to ask anyone like, are you on steroids? So, but I'm, being somewhat of a reasonable adult, I would have to believe that there's people out there that have taken or used it. Frankly, I also don't care.
That was going to be my follow-up is, does it fucking matter?
It really doesn't. And this is not to demean the sport or what it means to people or anything like that, but there's no ultimate governing body for Highland Games. It's all very fractured. And it's all very personal decisions that people make to go out and have fun. It's their life, it's their bodies. There's a component that you can say when you get to a point where money is being exchanged, is it appropriate? Is it not? Even when I was throwing pro, I didn't give a shit. I didn't care because again, I look at that as someone's personal choice. What they're taking, what they've decided is an appropriate risk for them to go out and do, and how smart or not smart they're being with it. But I never had any issue with that. And and then specifically with TRT, in this day and age, just about anyone my age is on it. It is the literal fountain of youth. And here's the big shocker headline for the podcast. I'm taking it.
Yeah.
I started taking TRT about a year ago. And it's the greatest thing on the face of the planet. I don't know how else to explain it.
It's legal cocaine. You heard
it. It's the fountain of youth. I made the personal decision. I've had my testosterone levels have been in the basement basically since I was born. But I made the personal decision that as I was competing and throwing, I didn't want to take it. but my decision should have no bearing on anyone else's, and nor do I fault anyone that would decide to do that while they're competing or throwing. Again, that's their own personal decision. But mine was a lifestyle choice after the fact, with after retiring from the Highland. After, I guess it was 2 years after, or a year and a half after retiring from the Highland Games, that it just increases my quality of life, and I want to stay active, and I want to maintain as much um, effective muscle mass as I can, again, so I can be active with my family, with my little girl, so I can maintain energy and maintain strength to bebop around the mountains and hunting and doing all those things. So it's a tricky subject in the community as well, because it's a sport, it's a competitive sport at a certain level. There's money being exchanged. So is that cheating? Is it not cheating? It's Yeah, I think it's a topic that all of us can have opinions on,
Mm-hmm.
but in the same breath, no one's really opinion matters, because there's simply no governing body. There's no one person who says yes or no. And I think the argument also is, as fractured as the sport is, and how much certain individuals are trying to get it back in the limelight, at least even within the strength sports community, monies that can be spent on deterring PEDs or testing for PEDs are so much better spent on marketing our actual sport and highlighting our athletes, our men and women who are throwing unbelievable numbers and that are doing crazy athletic things. I think it's monies that could be spent deterring that, or just better bolstering the network of games and the network of ADs and getting them the resources that they need for good judges. And then on the business side, for marketing and making sure that we're appealing to a broader audience than those who already know about the games.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more on all those fronts. Unless something happens that magically unifies everything and we all agree to a set rule book, it who gives a shit? You know?
Right.
Unless someone wants to start hosting the drug tested world championship and everyone that agrees who shows up is that they're not on drugs and that they'll be tested, I'm not sure what the debate is.
I don't think there's much of one. But and again, I understand people that are passionate about it, and anti this and anti that, and that is most certainly their right to speak
Yeah.
up, to be heard about it. But at the end of the day, that it really doesn't matter.
Hey, and you know what I discovered last year? If you are passionate about the way something that could be done, you can just host your own game.
Right? Yeah. Hey, go do it, and walk a mile in an athletic director's shoes, and
Yeah, you're more than welcome to. Look, man, go find a venue, go find sponsors, and get some athletes, and apparently a bunch of piss tests if that's what you're into, and
the
call
the
it the
uh,
PP
the
games.
R.
I don't
Kelly
care.
Invitational.
You know, in the cup in front of me games. I don't give a shit. You're you have the ability. No one's stopping you. It's the beautiful and horrible thing of this sport, man. You could do whatever with it. It's
Yep.
it's what makes it awesome, and it's what makes it insane.
Very true.
So, but yeah, man, we've run through everything. We've talked for over an hour. Is there anything you wanted to talk about coming on here? Because I've kind of been steering it through my whole list of things. You got anything for me, or is there anything you want everyone to know or do or be
The
about?
So a perspective of someone who's gone through the full evolution of the Highland Games athlete, right? The newbie that thinks they're going to be great and finds out they're horrible, to becoming obsessed, to working, to throwing, lifting, seeking out coaches, doing all those things. So what I want to say is something kind of outside of the athletic portion of the Highland Games. But one of the things that I did realize when I removed myself from the Highland Games, again, it was cold turkey. I went from at least 20 times a year traveling to see a certain group of people, both athletes and judges and directors and people in the crowd and bands and all this stuff. For 10 years, I was accustomed to seeing those people, and it didn't occur to me how impactful those relationships were until I again just walked away cold turkey. It was about a year outside of it where we're generally used to spending some time alone. Again, training by ourselves. It's very singular and solo sport in that regard. But it hit me after the fact that how much I really did value the kinship that I was getting on the field.
Yeah.
Particularly when I was throwing pro in the Southeast, because you see the same roster of 6 to 8 guys that compete and throw at the pro level out in the Southeast. I would see them every other weekend, hanging out and catching up. How are your kids doing? How's the wife? What's going on here? Trading funny stories. The camaraderie of busting one another's chops when you bomb out at something or a crappy throw. It really didn't occur till after the fact how impactful that is. So, I guess what I'm getting at is like anything else, make sure that you pay attention to that you're nurturing those relationships and find ways to pull it off the field as well too. If you connect with people, don't discount the value of what the Highland Games offers. It's not just physical well-being. It's not just athletic opportunity. It is also the relationships that you build with those people, and that is very important to people's mental well-being.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love it. For those that don't know, you are the athletic director for the Greenville Games now, right? Do you want to plug that and tell people when it is and how they can find out more info about that?
That is correct. So that is in May in Greenville, South Carolina. John Allen was previously, I want to say he did it for 12 years. He was the athletic director for Greenville. So he was the director and throwing on my first games. He and the board that managed the Greenville Games do a phenomenal job. So it's on Furman, which is, I believe it's a private university in Greenville, South Carolina, it's a gorgeous campus. It's a lot of fun to throw at. The festival is huge. The plane flyover is unbelievable. The pipes, everything. So the festival itself is a professional festival. It's attended by 10,000 plus people during that Saturday. So my objective coming in is to simply just not fuck it up.
Love it.
I know how to come and throw some rocks and throw some hammers, but this will be my first endeavor being the athletic director at a game. So I'm going to lean on the expertise of those that are going to be judging, those that are going to be assisting with setup and breakdown and getting feedback from the board. So I'm not coming in as a change agent by any stretch of the imagination. I just want to make sure that we continue to have a high caliber and quality games in the Southeast with Greenville and have a good time and keep everyone safe. Honestly, that's my biggest concern, and that was one of my concerns even as an athlete, is just safety, because we all have those moments and memories of near misses or people actually getting hurt.
Yeah.
And
the headlights going out and baby carriages getting smashed. And
oh my God, it's the list goes on, and it's terrifying. But that if I can conclude the Greenville Games this year or next year in 2024 with everyone had a good time. It was a great festival. It kept up the status quo. Nobody got hurt. That would be a resounding success. So
awesome. Well, I'm wishing you all the best for it, man. And I hope a lot of people go out there. I'm hoping I can make it down.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll have me, and then maybe even run into you at the Asheville Games this year if I'm able to make it work.
Bundle up, buddy.
Yeah, hand warmers everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring a ground blind and just set a heater in it. Just go back in there in between.
Propane heater and just tape hand warmers to your body.
Best investment I ever made for winter hunting was the propane heater. That thing is a lifesaver. Nice. But yeah, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on. And I'll let you know when I get this thing pushed out.
I dig it, man. I appreciate reaching out to me and letting me jibber jabber for an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always welcome.
Cool, buddy.
All right, man.
Bye.
Bye. The Barn Gym. If you guys are anywhere near Caroline County, Virginia, or Ruth or Glenn, or if you like making a drive and find yourself somewhere near the 95 Route 1 corridor in the northern part of Central Virginia, stop on by and check out the Barn Gym. It is the only 24-hour strength facility in that area. It has everything you need from Highland Games to strongman to powerlifting to grip sports or just general fitness. You can find them at thebarngymva.com, on Instagram at The Barn Gym VA, a period between every word, or you can email them at ltgthebarngym@gmail.com. That's L as in Lincoln, T as in Tom, G as in George, thebarngym@gmail.com. Check them out. The one and only Badger Highland Games Supply. If you are looking for any and all equipment related to the Highland Games, reach out to Greg Martz. He runs Badger Highland Games Supply. You can find him on Instagram or Facebook by searching Badger Highland Games Supply. He's got a full price list: hammers, weights, sheaf forks, sheaf bags, anything and everything you could need. He's your man. We'd like to take a moment to talk about our other sponsor, ChemStud. ChemStud is an app to help you with chemistry. Written by a high school chemistry teacher who was tired of explaining everything over and over, ChemStud is capable of solving basically any and all general chemistry problem. ChemStud is capable of showing its work using significant figures and is receiving new updates all the time. ChemStud is available on iOS and Android for $4.99 in the App Store. Stop struggling with chemistry and become a ChemStud today.